You kept your promise?" The words echoed like a bell through the Waitress lounge, slicing through the soft clink of crystal glasses and the subtle hum of the string quartet in the corner. All eyes turned toward the center of the room, where a simple sapphire ring caught the light like a drop of liquid sky. Naomi Carter, a 24-year-old waitress with smooth dark skin and an elegance that came from resilience rather than wealth, stood frozen for a heartbeat, her almond-shaped eyes locking onto the man who had once towered over her with arrogance. Ethan Whitman, a 42-year-old tech billionaire known for his ironclad composure and perfectly tailored suits, froze mid-step, his sharp gray eyes widening as they settled on the ring glinting on Naomi's finger. The atmosphere seemed to slow, the murmurs of nearby patrons dissolving into silence. Every flicker of candlelight reflected in polished mahogany tables, creating an almost cinematic glow around her. She hadn't spoken a word yet, but the room could feel the weight of her presence. Years of navigating crowded floors, carrying trays heavier than her own determination, and enduring sideways glances had sharpened her poise into something almost regal. The soft hum of her necklace as she breathed, the subtle shift of her shoulders, even the careful placement of her hands on the edge of the serving tray seemed to command attention without demanding it. Ethan's lips parted slightly, a faint frown forming as memories stirred. A childhood promise whispered across a playground of scraped knees and unshared lunches, a vow made in innocence between two children from opposite worlds. The sapphire's deep blue reflected more than light. It reflected history, loyalty, and the hidden strength that Naomi had nurtured from orphan beginnings to a young woman who now carried herself with a calm authority that belied her humble origins. Around them, the luxurious lounge, the gleaming marble floors, the velvet drapes, and the ambient glow of the chandelier served as the perfect stage for the quiet drama unfolding. Guests adjusted in their seats, subconsciously leaning closer, the scent of truffle and aged oak mingling in the air, but no one spoke. They were all witnesses to something larger than the daily routines of wealth and service, an unspoken truth about promises, integrity, and the unexpected power of a woman who had been underestimated at every turn. Naomi's gaze didn't waver. She lifted the tray slightly, not to serve, but as a subtle anchor for her presence, a visual rhythm that seemed to steady the room as well as herself. Ethan's pulse, normally steady and commanding, skipped a beat, and he realized in a flash that this wasn't a display of submission, a humble gesture, or a plea for acknowledgment. It was a quiet assertion of worth. The sapphire ring glimmered as Naomi adjusted it, her eyes meeting his, conveying decades of patience, resilience, and an unwavering sense of self. A slight intake of breath, unnoticed by the other patrons, betrayed Ethan's disbelief as his mind raced through memories, regrets, and the sudden awareness that the girl he had once thought powerless had quietly grown into someone who could stop him in his tracks with nothing but a glance and a ring. The soft tap of her shoes against the polished floor, the gentle swish of her black uniform, and the glint of the sapphire created a choreography of subtle dominance that required no words yet spoke volumes. Every detail, from the polished wine glasses catching the chandelier light to the faint rustle of napkins, seemed to pulse in unison with Naomi's calm, measured movements. Ethan's usual air of certainty faltered. He realized that all the power he had amassed in boardrooms, in tech summits, and in investments could not anticipate the quiet, unstoppable force embodied by a woman whose life had been defined by challenge, integrity, and the promises kept against impossible odds. The room held its collective breath as Naomi Carter, the waitress who had once been invisible, now stood as the center of attention, not through spectacle or shouting, but through the silent command of her presence, the legacy of her promise, and the undeniable truth that some bonds, no matter how humble their origin, carried a force capable of freezing even the most powerful. The room remained suspended in that fragile silence, every subtle movement amplified as Naomi Carter lowered her tray to the side, her posture impeccable, her breathing steady yet deliberate, the soft whisper of her shoes against the polished oak floor echoing in the vast lounge, as though marking each second like a metronome of tension and anticipation. Guests shifted slightly in their seats, some leaning forward with curiosity, others craning their necks for a clearer view. the air thick with the scent of roasted truffle and freshly polished marble, mingling with the faint perfume of rare orchids arranged along the long dining table. Ethan Whitman's eyes flicked repeatedly between the sapphire ring and Naomi's composed face, the realization that his childhood arrogance had underestimated her weighing heavier with every passing moment. He had built empires, navigated boardrooms with iron precision, yet this simple gesture, a ring and a promise kept, disrupted the narrative of power he had spent decades constructing. Naomi's fingers, delicate yet confident, traced the contour of the sapphire, a motion both unconscious and commanding, drawing the eyes of every observer without uttering a word. The lighting in the room, soft and deliberate, caught the glint of the chandeliers above, casting long reflections across the polished floors, illuminating the fine details of the crystal glassware and the subtle embroidery on the chairs, creating a visual rhythm that mirrored the pulse of the unfolding story. Around them, the murmurs of the patrons quieted into near reverence, the subtle clink of silver cutlery now a distant background hum, leaving only the weight of presence and unspoken history. Naomi's backstory hovered invisibly in the space between them. An orphan childhood, long nights working multiple shifts to support her younger brother, navigating a world where her presence was often overlooked or dismissed. Each hardship, each trial, had refined her awareness, teaching her to command attention not through volume, but through quiet confidence, measured movement, and an unshakable sense of dignity. Ethan's normally unwavering demeanor faltered as fragments of their shared past surfaced, a memory of a promise made on a sun-warmed swing set, a vow between children who imagined futures far from their modest beginnings, now rendered tangible by the glint of the sapphire on Naomi's finger. He shifted slightly in his chair, the smooth fabric of his tailored suit stretching minutely with the motion, a sign of tension that would have been invisible to anyone untrained in observation. But every detail mattered here. Every imperceptible twitch spoke volumes. Naomi's eyes did not waver. They held a calm intensity, scanning the room not to intimidate, but to anchor her presence, a beacon of control in a moment of collective uncertainty. The subtle rise and fall of her chest, the measured movement of her hands adjusting the tray beside her, all created a cadence that resonated with the rhythm of the room itself, compelling attention without a single spoken word. Around them, time seemed to stretch. Servers paused mid-step, patrons held their glasses a fraction longer than necessary, and even the soft jazz from the corner ensemble seemed to soften, acknowledging an unspoken shift in energy. Ethan's pulse quickened imperceptibly, a rare crack in the armor of his practiced poise, as he processed the magnitude of the gesture and the reality that the young woman before him, once dismissed as background noise, now commanded the narrative with nothing more than her history, her promise, and the quiet force of presence cultivated through years of perseverance. The sapphire's blue depth reflected the ambient light like a small, private sun, drawing eyes and attention not through extravagance, but through significance, a symbol of commitment and the surprising power of fidelity and resilience. Every detail, Naomi's stance, the subtle gleam of her ring, the pattern of light across the table, the faint hum of distant conversation, wove together into a tapestry of anticipation and revelation, setting the stage for a moment that would not only freeze Ethan in realization, but also leave the entire room suspended in awe at the quiet authority of a woman whose life had been defined by perseverance, integrity, and the unexpected force of fulfilled promises. Naomi Carter shifted slightly, the subtle movement of her shoulders drawing a quiet rhythm that seemed to echo through the lounge, each step deliberate, measured, as though she were conducting the very air around her. Ethan Whitman remained frozen, his sharp gray eyes fixed on the sapphire, on the promise it symbolized, on the woman who had transformed a childhood memory into a present reality that left him breathless. Around them, the room held its collective breath, the soft shuffle of feet and the gentle clinking of cutlery fading into near silence, leaving only the ambient warmth of candlelight reflecting off polished mahogany and crystal surfaces. Naomi's gaze swept across the faces of onlookers, not with arrogance, but with a quiet assertion, the subtle arch of her chin and the calm depth in her eyes, signaling confidence rooted in years of navigating a world that often overlooked her. She had grown up understanding that presence mattered more than volume, that dignity carried weight even when wealth did not, and now every motion she made seemed to confirm that truth. Ethan's pulse quickened imperceptibly, a physiological echo of the mental unraveling he felt as he absorbed the reality of her composure, the depth of her history, and the strength encapsulated in a single gesture of elegance and fidelity. The sapphire caught a flicker of light from the chandelier above, sending a tiny cascade of blue across the polished marble floor, a visual marker of significance that drew attention not for extravagance, but for meaning. Waitstaff paused mid-motion, servers straightened instinctively, and patrons leaned forward, captivated not by spectacle, but by the resonance of authenticity that Naomi projected. Memories from years past seemed to linger in the space between them, a promise whispered between children on a sunlit playground, a vow made in simplicity that now resonated with quiet potency. Ethan's lips parted as if to speak, then closed again, the weight of comprehension pressing against his carefully constructed persona of control and precision. Every detail in the room contributed to the charged atmosphere, the soft hum of conversation that dared not break the spell, the delicate glint of silverware. Reflecting candlelight, the subtle rustle of fine linens, as though even the physical space acknowledged the shift in power and perception. Naomi's hand adjusted slightly on the edge of her tray, an almost imperceptible motion, yet it carried the full measure of her command. Calm, unwavering, informed by lived experience and the quiet resilience of a life forged through challenge. Ethan's reflection in the mirror behind the bar revealed a rare fracture in his demeanor, the faintest hint of uncertainty crossing his otherwise composed features, an acknowledgment that authority derived from wealth alone could not anticipate the depth of character, the intentionality, and the quiet strength displayed by the young woman before him. The lighting accentuated the sapphire's brilliance, the folds of Naomi's uniform, and the poised stance she maintained, all merging into a tableau that captivated the room and commanded respect without a single raised voice. The subtle cadence of her movements, the almost imperceptible tilt of her head, and the calm clarity of her eyes transformed a simple interaction into a profound narrative of integrity, honor, and the transformative power of keeping one's word. Each passing second reinforced the lesson in humility and presence. The richest man in the room, accustomed to commanding attention and dictating outcomes, now found himself a silent observer to the demonstration of quiet authority, a living witness to the enduring impact of dignity and fulfilled promises. The atmosphere vibrated with anticipation, a collective awareness that something extraordinary had unfolded, a moment suspended in time, where power was measured not by assets or accolades, but by the strength of character and the unwavering execution of a personal truth. Naomi stood, composed, an unspoken anchor in the elegant chaos, and every observer, from the nearest guest to the servers across the room, recognized in that stillness a story of resilience, of long-held commitments, and of a force that commanded recognition not through spectacle, but through the simple, undeniable assertion of presence. The subtle tension that had filled the Waitress lounge began to ripple outward, like a quiet wave brushing against every patron and server alike, each sensing the shift in atmosphere even before words were exchanged. Naomi Carter's calm yet commanding presence seemed to expand, filling the room without effort, and Ethan Whitman, despite decades of experience navigating power and influence, found himself unmoored, unable to predict or control this unfolding moment. The soft glow of the chandeliers above created pools of light on the polished marble floors, reflecting the delicate sheen of crystal glassware and the meticulous arrangement of silver cutlery, all of which seemed to bear witness to the invisible narrative now taking center stage. Naomi's hands rested lightly on her tray, yet each micro-movement spoke volumes. The gentle adjustment of her fingers, the tilt of her wrist, the subtle pivot of her body as she maintained perfect posture. Every detail underscored the quiet authority she had cultivated from years of navigating spaces that often overlooked her, teaching her that presence alone could command attention and respect. Ethan's usually unshakable composure faltered as he scanned her face, reading the layers of history, determination, and integrity written there, and the realization dawned that all the wealth and influence he had accumulated did not prepare him for the quiet power of someone whose life had been defined by perseverance and the fulfillment of promises. Around them, the other diners and staff absorbed the tension without knowing exactly why. Servers paused mid-step, glasses were held a fraction longer in midair, and the subtle hum of ambient music seemed to soften, yielding space for the gravity of the moment. Naomi's eyes, dark and reflective, scanned the room with neither arrogance nor seeking approval, but with the calm certainty of someone fully aware of her own worth and the impact of her presence. The ring caught a flicker of light from the chandelier, sending a soft sapphire glow across the table, a small but potent signal that drew attention not through extravagance, but through meaning. Memories of shared childhood moments flickered invisibly between Naomi and Ethan, a testament to promises kept and integrity maintained. Yet the expression on Naomi's face was serene, almost meditative, inviting comprehension without pressure, allowing those who observed to feel the weight of authenticity. Ethan's breath caught subtly, a rare crack in the carefully constructed armor of control, as he absorbed the significance of the gesture, the convergence of history, dignity, and quiet assertion in one simple, tangible act. The room's ambient sounds, whispered conversations, the shuffle of menus, the clink of a silver spoon, retreated to background noise, leaving only the resonance of character and intent, a tableau of elegance, poise, and moral authority that demanded recognition. Naomi shifted her weight slightly, a deliberate yet understated motion that maintained her balance and composure while reinforcing her presence, every gesture echoing with years of refined discipline and lived experience. The sapphire glimmered again, its light dancing along her uniform and the polished surfaces around, casting reflections that mirrored the subtle intensities of the scene. Patrons instinctively straightened, some leaning forward as if drawn by an invisible magnet, all captivated by the unfolding revelation of resilience and grace. Ethan's expression evolved from shock to contemplation, his gray eyes tracing the depth of character before him, acknowledging in a single, unspoken moment that power is not solely measured by influence or wealth, but by integrity, patience, and the quiet assertion of self in the face of doubt. Naomi remained composed, her gaze steady, embodying the strength and dignity that had brought her to this precise intersection of past promises and present reality, the room around them suspended in the reverent quiet of recognition, every subtle movement amplifying the weight of presence and the enduring impact of character. The interplay of light, shadow, and reflection across the room mirrored the unfolding revelation, the ambience itself bending to the gravity of a story where honor and steadfastness overshadowed status and fortune, leaving every observer, from the nearest patron to the servers across the room, in awe of a woman whose history, commitment, and quiet strength commanded attention without a single word spoken. Ethan Whitman's gaze lingered on Naomi Carter, a mixture of disbelief and admiration softening the edges of his usually imperious expression, as though he were suddenly seeing the world through a lens he had long ignored. The sapphire on her finger gleamed, catching the warm light from the chandeliers above, and with each subtle reflection, it seemed to illuminate the story of perseverance, loyalty, and quiet strength that Naomi embodied. The ambient murmur of the room had dwindled to a reverent hush, punctuated only by the soft scrape of chairs and the muted tinkle of glasses, creating a rhythm that mirrored the tension and awe enveloping the space. Naomi shifted slightly, the measured motion of her shoulders and the careful placement of her hands on the edge of her tray a silent declaration of control, poise, and the authority that comes not from wealth but from lived experience and integrity. Patrons instinctively leaned forward, their curiosity and attention drawn by the unspoken narrative, sensing that a moment of significance was unfolding, one defined not by status or material accumulation, but by the resonance of character and the fulfillment of promises. Ethan's mind traced back to memories of shared childhood moments, the innocence of a vow whispered on a sunlit playground now transformed into tangible proof of commitment and resilience, embodied in the calm confidence and dignity of Naomi's presence. The lighting cast a gentle glow over the scene, highlighting the textures of the polished marble, the gleam of crystal, and the subtle interplay of shadows across the long dining tables, each detail harmonizing with the unfolding tableau of quiet authority and moral clarity. Naomi's eyes, dark and reflective, scanned the room with neither arrogance nor plea, communicating through the precision of her stance, the subtle shift of her weight, and the steady rhythm of her breath that she commanded recognition without demanding it, her very presence an assertion of earned respect and unshakable self-awareness. Ethan's pulse, normally regulated and unwavering, quickened as the depth of her composure and the layers of her history became undeniable, a reminder that true influence is not always measured by titles or financial success, but by the integrity and steadfastness of one's character. The sapphire glimmered with a quiet brilliance, a symbol not of opulence, but of trust, promises kept, and the enduring power of presence cultivated through adversity. Naomi's subtle movements orchestrated the room's energy, drawing attention in the most understated way, allowing every observer, from servers to diners, to perceive the weight of dignity and the silent authority she exuded. The tension in Ethan's posture softened, a rare acknowledgment that the hierarchy he had relied upon for decades was being redefined, moment by moment, by the simple, unspoken assertion of her worth. The room seemed to breathe in unison with Naomi's calm, the interplay of light, reflection, and movement creating a cinematic tableau where every small detail, from the shimmer of glass to the soft echo of footsteps on the marble, reinforced the lesson of quiet resilience, the potency of promises honored, and the shift in perception that now placed her, unequivocally, at the center of the narrative. Guests remained motionless, captivated by the invisible dialogue of character, history, and integrity unfolding before them, recognizing that the real power in the room had quietly shifted, not through display or declaration, but through the meticulous, composed presence of a woman who had navigated hardship, honored her word, and demonstrated that true influence derives from substance, not spectacle. The subtle electricity in the Waitress lounge shifted again, a quiet undercurrent that threaded through the polished tables, the crystal glasses, and the muted conversation that still lingered despite the commanding presence of Naomi Carter. Her gaze remained steady on Ethan Whitman, the intensity in her dark eyes conveying a depth of history, resilience, and unspoken authority that transcended the usual dynamics of wealth and status. The sapphire on her finger reflected the soft chandelier light in a cascade of blue, a visual echo of the promise that had shaped her youth and now illuminated her composure in a room filled with people who had never expected her to command such attention. Ethan's normally sharp and decisive demeanor softened as he registered the quiet certainty radiating from Naomi. Every fraction of movement she made, from the tilt of her head to the subtle positioning of her hands on the tray, communicated an unshakable confidence that left him momentarily unmoored. The ambient sound of the lounge, the gentle scrape of chairs, the faint tinkle of silverware, seemed to recede, replaced by an almost tangible hush that acknowledged the moral weight of the moment. Patrons shifted subtly in their seats, leaning in without realizing it, captivated not by spectacle, but by the resonance of character and integrity that Naomi projected. Her story, embedded in the way she carried herself, the years of navigating spaces where she had been overlooked, the discipline honed from early mornings and late nights balancing multiple responsibilities, spoke louder than any word could, asserting presence, command, and the quiet power of fulfilled promises. Ethan's pulse, normally steady and unshakable, betrayed the significance of her gesture, a rhythm echoing the revelation that the authority he had long relied upon could not anticipate the influence born of principle, resilience, and character. The soft reflections of light across the marble floors, the careful symmetry of the table settings, and the delicate glow of candlelight created a cinematic tableau, enhancing the perception of Naomi's poised authority as she moved with purpose that required no audience, yet captured one fully. Every glance, every micro-expression of the surrounding diners and staff subtly acknowledged the shift, the power of wealth and status, the accumulation of influence and resources was momentarily suspended in the face of authenticity, integrity, and the quiet assertion of a life lived with intention. Naomi's controlled breathing, the deliberate rhythm of her steps, and the calm steadiness of her hands as she adjusted the placement of a glass or subtly shifted her weight all reinforced the narrative that true influence is measured not in public recognition or material possessions, but in the way one carries oneself, honors promises, and commands respect through presence alone. Ethan's features, usually composed into an impervious mask, revealed the faintest hints of reflection, contemplation, and a growing appreciation of the depth of character before him. The room itself seemed to bend to the gravity of the moment. The interplay of light and shadow, the glimmering sapphire, the polished surfaces, and the attentive observers converging into a tableau that crystallized the transformation of perception, the redefinition of influence, and the revelation that dignity, integrity, and steadfast presence could quietly, yet profoundly, reshape the understanding of power in a room accustomed to conventional hierarchies. Every subtle detail, from the shimmer of the chandelier's light on Naomi's uniform to the soft murmur of distant conversation, reinforced the lesson unfolding in real time. Authority is not solely derived from wealth, position, or command. It is earned and recognized in the spaces where character, resilience, and the fulfillment of promises meet the gaze of those who have underestimated it for too long. The audience, whether aware or not, absorbed the quiet transformation, each witness internalizing the moment, sensing that a recalibration of influence, respect, and acknowledgment had occurred, orchestrated through nothing more than presence, grace, and the unspoken power of a life built with steadfast intention. The stillness in the Waitress lounge stretched for a moment longer, a collective pause in the rhythm of conversation and movement, as if the entire space were holding its breath in recognition of the subtle, yet profound shift that had just occurred. Naomi Carter stood poised, her dark eyes meeting Ethan Whitman's gaze with the quiet confidence of someone who had weathered life's most challenging moments and emerged with integrity intact. The sapphire on her finger caught the ambient light, scattering delicate reflections across the polished marble floor, each glint echoing the depth of history and commitment it represented. Ethan's expression softened, the tension in his posture easing as he absorbed the gravity of the moment, realizing that the true measure of worth, power, and influence was not in titles, financial acumen, or accolades, but in the unwavering dignity, resilience, and presence embodied by the young woman before him. The lounge, bathed in the warm glow of chandeliers and accented by the soft hum of the string quartet, seemed to acknowledge her quiet authority. Every polished surface, every crystal glass, and every finely set table amplifying the scene's cinematic resonance. Patrons and staff alike were caught in the spell, their own movements becoming more deliberate, their attention captured not by spectacle, but by the narrative of character, perseverance, and fulfilled promises unfolding before them. Naomi's subtle gestures, the measured placement of her hands, the graceful shift of her weight, the calm steadiness of her breathing, conveyed more than words ever could, articulating a story of endurance, moral clarity, and unassailable poise. Ethan's mind replayed fragments of their shared history, the innocence of childhood vows now made tangible through her presence, the sapphire a symbol of consistency, loyalty, and the quiet strength that had carried her through years of being underestimated and overlooked. The interplay of light and shadow in the room highlighted the contours of her uniform and the glint of the ring, creating an almost painterly tableau where every detail contributed to the sense of revelation and moral resonance. Servers and patrons held their positions, some unconsciously straightening, others leaning forward, as if physically drawn into the gravity of the moment, sensing that the ordinary dynamics of wealth and status had been temporarily suspended in favor of authenticity, integrity, and the enduring power of character. Naomi's eyes swept the room, not seeking acknowledgment but commanding respect, her calm and precise movements orchestrating the room's energy, drawing attention without assertion, demonstrating that influence can be subtle, intentional, and grounded in truth. Ethan's composure, usually meticulous and controlled, now revealed subtle cracks, a reflection of his recognition that the power he once assumed as inherent and unquestionable could be recalibrated through presence, resilience, and moral strength. The gentle shimmer of the sapphire mirrored the soft flicker of candlelight, the reflection dancing across marble, glass, and linen, reinforcing the symbolic weight of promises kept and the quiet assertion of self in spaces where invisibility had once been assumed. Every micro-expression, every subtle motion in the room contributed to a collective understanding that authority and recognition are earned through integrity and character rather than declared status. Naomi remained steady, her presence a testament to the years of disciplined perseverance and the consistent application of moral clarity. And in this suspension of ordinary time, the room collectively acknowledged that the real power had shifted, not through spectacle, command, or wealth, but through the subtle yet undeniable force of dignity, promise fulfilled, and the extraordinary impact of a life lived with intention. Ethan Whitman, still seated yet visibly transformed, regarded her with a newfound respect, his usual air of control softened by the awareness that she had, in a single, composed gesture, demonstrated a mastery of presence, moral authority, and quiet influence that left a lasting impression on everyone fortunate enough to witness it. The lounge gradually resumed its usual rhythm, though the air remained charged with a sense of significance that lingered like the faint echo of a bell. Every footstep, every whispered comment acknowledging the extraordinary moment that had unfolded. Naomi Carter moved with unhurried precision, retrieving a water glass from a nearby table, her movements fluid yet purposeful, each step measured, commanding attention without the need for spoken words. Ethan Whitman, seated but visibly transformed, watched her with a mixture of respect and contemplation, the weight of realization settling across his features as he absorbed the quiet lesson of humility, integrity, and the understated yet undeniable power of character. The sapphire glinting on her finger caught the ambient light once more, scattering tiny fragments of blue across the polished marble floors, illuminating the space as if nature itself conspired to emphasize the significance of her presence. Around them, diners and staff alike adjusted subconsciously. Chairs scraped gently against the floor, silverware shifted in delicate balance, all movements seemingly attuned to the gravity of the scene, the silent acknowledgement of a narrative that transcended wealth, titles, or status. Naomi's posture remained impeccable, the subtle curvature of her shoulders, the confident tilt of her head, and the calm cadence of her breathing projecting a quiet authority cultivated through years of persistence, adversity, and lived experience, a testament to resilience and moral fortitude. Ethan's gray eyes traced her every motion, registering the depth of her history, the clarity of her intent, and the tangible manifestation of promises kept, each gesture a reminder that influence derived not merely from position or power, but from the consistent application of integrity, patience, and presence. The soft glow from chandeliers above reflected across the crystal glassware and fine linens, creating an interplay of light and shadow that highlighted Naomi's composed form, her movements orchestrating a subtle yet profound command over the atmosphere, the visual narrative reinforcing the moral resonance of the encounter. Patrons, though attempting to resume their conversations, could not fully ignore the gravity permeating the room, each subtle glance and involuntary pause acknowledging the shift in dynamics, the recalibration of respect and perception occurring quietly but unmistakably before their eyes. The lounge, with its polished surfaces and ambient warmth, seemed to recognize the narrative at play. A woman once overlooked and underestimated now occupied the moral and perceptual center of attention, her presence alone reshaping the understanding of influence and authority. Ethan's demeanor softened further, a rare vulnerability crossing his composed features as he absorbed the lesson embedded in Naomi's steadfastness, dignity, and quiet assertion of self, realizing that the narrative of power had been rewritten not through confrontation or spectacle, but through unwavering character, fulfilled promises, and an unspoken yet commanding authority. The sapphire reflected the delicate chandelier light in a way that made the moment feel suspended, almost eternal, each flicker a subtle reminder that actions defined by integrity and presence resonated more profoundly than words or status. Naomi moved toward a side table to straighten a chair, her hands steady, her eyes calm, projecting an ease and confidence that radiated through the room, inviting acknowledgment without demanding it, allowing observers to grasp the full measure of her influence in silence. Ethan observed, fully aware that the encounter had left an indelible impression, a demonstration that real power is quietly exercised through character, patience, and the steadfast honoring of promises, leaving the audience, staff, and himself with a lasting recognition of what true authority and presence could accomplish without spectacle, demand, or declaration. The lounge itself seeming to hum in quiet accord with the moral and emotional gravity of Naomi Carter's composed and unwavering presence. The evening in the Waitress lounge began to settle, but a subtle reverence lingered, the kind that comes when a moment of profound recognition has occurred and the room collectively senses the weight of what has just unfolded. Naomi Carter moved with the same measured grace that had held the room in silent attention, retrieving a water carafe and pouring with precision, each movement deliberate, unhurried, yet commanding an almost imperceptible authority that resonated across polished marble floors and reflected in the glint of crystal glasses. Ethan Whitman, seated yet alert, remained captivated, his eyes tracing the contours of her composed form, the quiet power in her posture, the serene confidence in her gaze, and the sapphire ring that seemed to anchor a story of integrity, resilience, and promises fulfilled. The lighting from the chandeliers above caught the ring's facets, scattering subtle reflections across the tables, folding into the ambient glow of the room, creating a cinematic tapestry of light that accentuated the gravity of Naomi's presence. Patrons, while attempting to resume their conversations, could not shake the awareness of her quiet authority, their gestures and whispers softened by the sense that they had witnessed more than a simple interaction. They had observed the intersection of history, promise, and moral weight brought to life in real time. Naomi's breathing remained steady, her hands moving with exacting care as she placed glasses and adjusted table settings, a choreography of presence that silently asserted her influence without a word, demonstrating that authority can be earned and acknowledged through poise, dignity, and lived experience rather than declaration. Ethan's normally unflappable composure showed faint tremors of reflection, a subtle acknowledgment that wealth, status, and command could not replicate the quiet power demonstrated by someone who had cultivated strength, character, and resilience through every challenge. The sapphire reflected in the soft candlelight became more than jewelry. It was a symbol of enduring promises, integrity kept, and the power of presence that transcends material status, reminding the room of the deep resonance a single, composed individual can impart. Servers paused mid-motion, guests adjusted posture, and the ambient sounds of clinking silver and low conversations dimmed in significance, all harmonizing with the moral gravity of the moment, creating a suspended space in which character and quiet influence prevailed over spectacle. Naomi's gaze swept briefly over the room, not seeking acknowledgement, yet every observer sensed the magnitude of her composure, understanding that presence, dignity, and consistency in one's actions can shift perceptions, command attention, and alter the understanding of power in ways that are subtle yet profound. Ethan's mind replayed fragments of memory and realization, the innocence of a long-ago vow, the steadfastness that had carried her through years of being overlooked, and the undeniable assertion of her worth now on full display. Light danced across the room, emphasizing the refined textures of marble, crystal, and linen, mirroring the interplay of recognition, moral resonance, and silent authority. The lounge itself seemed to hold its breath as Naomi concluded her movements, her calm presence leaving a lasting impression, reinforcing a lesson understood intuitively by all present. True power is defined not by wealth, position, or command, but by integrity, patience, and the enduring strength of character, a truth made tangible through the quiet, steadfast grace of Naomi Carter, whose presence had reshaped not only the perception of Ethan Whitman, but also the atmosphere of every person fortunate enough to witness it, leaving a resonance that would persist long after the final flicker of